session. And then like two. There we go. Here. And the program.
Hi, I'm Danielle and I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Ottawa, studying gender disability and I'm a recent PhD grad of the Regulated program at the my full program of research is largely on Parasport. So I am a white woman in a class of 6. I have brown hair, a little older, brown eyes. So the first question that we want to raise, we want this to be somewhat interactive as possible. I know it's a large room, so we have the microphone around. We wanted to ask you, what is the first word or two that comes to mind when you think of mentorship? What does mentorship mean to you? Well, here, if you want. I'm not looking for the right answer.
Sharon.
Aaron. Aaron, yeah. Okay. What else does mentorship mean?
Guidance.
Guidance. What else?
Two-way relationship.
Love it. Any other? Support. Support. Amazing. So mentorship can mean a lot of different things, but often we see this idea of sharing, whether that's having a mentor for you, person in the field, or whether you are the mentor yourself, having one knowledge from your and we find it particularly important in the Parasport context, where there are smaller communities and less for you to naturally run into another coach, for example. So there's less of a informal network. So that's kind of what's part of this idea. So in terms of what we've seen in the literature when we were starting this study, myself and my colleagues from Danielle University, we did a quick review to take a look at what was in the literature with regards to so what did we know? We saw 44 different articles from 1990 to 2019. And among these articles, we saw topics covering general coaching knowledge, for example, these are your professional knowledge, skills, of Parasport, how disability elements of society and sport, as well as becoming a Parasport. This context so you can see that there's three main avenues when it comes to these are your large structured learning opportunities like the NLP, where you're learning specific information. Coaches and parents would love this opportunity, but they do find that they're missing that There are learning modules like the coaching athletes with a disability, where they can get a little bit more of that contextualized information, but it is one module, it is 45 minutes, so they want more of this. So after that, there's non-formal learning opportunities. This would be more like the practical hands-on type of learning, workshops, clinics, seminars. In that inclusive coaching workshop, for example, they had 3 hours and they had a classroom piece, and then they had where you're in the gym and you're working with athletes and actually getting that hands-on experience of adapting your coaching practices. Coaches love this, but they find that it's tricky sometimes because it's not always offered, especially during COVID. It can be expensive to attend, or there's travel involved. So because of that, they're not relying so much on these non-formal opportunities either. So it blends itself to going into the informal context, where that's self-directed learning, learning from, your own experiences, potentially as an athlete or as a coach, learning from your athletes, reading books, watching YouTube, and then for the context of this presentation, again, learning from your peers, talking to other coaches, picking up the phone and saying, hey, have you ever encountered something like this? Let's chat through it. So that's the mentorship piece. There's one study in particular that's focused on Parasport coach mentorship prior to this study. And it was done by researchers at McGill, so Fairhurst and colleagues. They interviewed 6 Canadian Paralympic coaches and asked them about their mentoring experiences. And what we found was that all 6 of them had either been a mentor or had a mentor throughout their careers. And they found that it was the most significant learning opportunity for them as coaches. They also said that it was primarily, if not exclusively, I can't remember now, all informal. And that led them to say, we really need a formal type of Parasport coach mentorship program. And when we looked at research that have done formal programs in other contexts, we've seen a lot of benefits. So Banwell and colleagues, they looked at mentee coach learning, and they found that they benefited on both professional and a personal level. So at this time, it was really critical to provide an opportunity for coaches to acquire mentorship in a formal way.
All right, thank you. So now we'll quickly talk about the program objectives. We'll dive a little bit deep into that. So the first objective that we have was pilot and evaluate the multi-sport mentorship program for coaches in Parasport. As it was mentioned, this was its first in its kind. We wanted to provide 20 Parasport coaches with mentorship support. And as you will see later on, we actually did surpass that number, which is great. We wanted to also train apprentices and mentors in the Transformational Coaching Parasport Workshop, which was run by Queen's University, and also train apprentices and mentors in the NCCP Coaching Athletes with a Disability e-learning module. This one. Perfect. So the program structure here, the program ran from October 2020 to September of 2021. We matched apprentices over here too. We matched apprentices and mentors based on their disability types that they selected rather than their sport. We emphasize that coaches are coaching the athlete rather than the sport. And this was also explained to all mentors and apprentices during the onboarding webinar. We encourage matches to meet at least once a month. So between those dates of October 2020 to September 2021. We also did provide free training for mentors and apprentices to complete the NCCP Coaching Athletes with a Disability e-learning module, and for mentors only to complete the NCCP mentorship training. Both mentors and apprentices did receive a small honorarium for completing the program that they could use to future their coach development. Program review was conducted by Dr. Alexander, and she will share the results with you shortly. And then finally, we were hoping to run an in-person event, but as we all know, something called COVID happened. So we had to deviate from that plan, and we did run a virtual game show event. This was just a fun way of concluding the program. Within the program structure, we did have 3 assignments that we asked mentors and apprentices to complete together. The first one being the communication agreement. This was to set out the parameters around the relationships, types of meeting, frequency of meetings, length of the meetings, availability, and different ways of how they would cancel or postpone a meeting. The second assignment was the learning plan. So setting SMART goals, short or long, to help focus efforts and increase chances of achieving their goals. And the final assignment was the mentorship reflection. So this piece was a reflection on the past year and how the coach has grown and provided feedback for this pilot program. And then finally, within the program, we also did run 4 professional development, or PD sessions that apprentices and mentors can listen to throughout the year. The first one was on how to maximize inclusivity, led by Joe Millage and Canadian Paralympians. This session also guided coaches to understand the participatory para-participatory pyramid, and the athletes included Marissa Papakostanchu, Jolyn Wong, Bradley Bowden, and Todd Kierstead. The second session was led by Dr. Amy Latimer Chung on quality participation. The third PD session was that transformational coaching workshop piece that Queen's University ran that was mentioned before. And the final PD session was a fireside chat with Joel Demby and the road he took to the Paralympics. All right, so I'm going to call on one of our mentors, Gwen Binsfeld, and in front of you, you have one of our assignments that the apprentices and mentors ran through. We'll do a condensed version, but I'll call on Gwen and she'll explain how to complete that document.
Thanks, Eric. You're not going to give them the challenge of their goal?
Sorry?
You're not going to give them their challenge of their goal on this thing? Okay, you all have a piece of paper in front of you, and it's really our assignment 2. It's been handed out already?
Yep.
Everybody's got one? All got a pen on your table? Okay. We're not going to have you set a bunch of goals that we're not going to be able to meet. So your goal that we'd like you to address is what is your goal here at the summit for the next 2 days? Okay, and you will have 5 minutes to go through it. Can we do the thing above it? The SMART measurable.
It's on the paper.
Okay, so if you read the criteria at the front, the very top, most of us have done this a million times at other things, so pretty familiar. So let's go back to, to where you were. Yeah. So you want to look at what your project outcome is going to be, what your action steps are going to be, and the resources needed, etc. So I want to point out that what I try to emphasize with all the people that are apprentices is you really do need to have a goal, not just a wish, and it has to be deadline driven. So we ask people to determine what it is their goal. So in the last 3 rounds of the mentorship, I've had about a half a dozen different sports that have come through. The main goal for all of them is learning about the disabilities. What does it mean? It doesn't matter if I'm working with a triathlon coach, cross country, soccer. It's all, that's their main reason for taking it. So we spend the lion's share of the time. What does it mean to have CP? What does it mean to have MS? What's spina bifida? How does that translate and impact on the sport that I'm trying to accomplish with this athlete? So that's the number 1 goal, I would say, for almost all the people coming through. The second goal that's really, really popular is, well, how do I integrate it? How can I possibly build them into the program that I'm doing? So I work with them and we all work with them to try and make that happen. So I was told I could only speak for a minute. I think I'm good. You have a few minutes here now to set your goals and go through it, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay, I'm going to take your attention away from that for a minute. You can continue with it after. I think the big thing with the goals is to make sure the mentor and the apprentice have the same goal. And that can sometimes be a problem, and you have to kind of figure it out. I had one apprentice that was the most challenging because she wasn't doing a sport and she wasn't coaching. I'm like, well, why are you taking this program? Because she wanted to do it eventually, but she hadn't had the courage to volunteer. And I said, go volunteer in any sport you want. They will need volunteers. You will get your experience. So aligning those goals, and sometimes coaches get all caught up in results. So in the last 10 years, I've coached from grassroots to World Cup. I've had a dozen athletes go to the Paralympics. The biggest win is skier for life. I do para-alpine mostly, but I've done swimming and hockey and all kinds of other sports. But if we get athletes at any age that become active and can stay active for life, it's a huge win. It doesn't matter if they ever compete in anything. So that's my own bias.
Thank you very much, Gwen. So we just also wanted to now share who the participants of the program were, as you may be asking yourself that. So the program offered coaches in Ontario from all levels of experience the opportunity to enhance their development. Apprentices had less than 5 years coaching athletes with a disability, and then mentors had greater than 5 years coaching athletes with a disability. We recruited 32 apprentice coaches and our goal was 20. So it's quite great to see that number. Of those 32, 29 completed the program. So that's 91% completion rate. Our 14 mentor coaches recruited had more than 225 years coaching athletes with a disability. It's a huge number and just shows you the caliber of the mentors in the program. Of those 29 coaches that completed the program, 22 sports were represented, from soccer to swimming to karate, and all corners of the province were covered or were represented, from Thunder Bay to Waterloo to Toronto and to Ottawa.
Okay. Okay, you don't have to keep doing it for me. So that brings us to the program review. So we did a pretty extensive review over the 1 year. Our goal was to better understand the coaches' experiences being involved in the program. So both the mentors and the mentees' experiences, with a focus more on the mentee learning. So we wanted to know what they liked, what they didn't like, and what recommendations they had for future iterations of the program. And this is an open access paper, which means that it's accessible to everyone free of cost. It's very rare to see open access in academia because it's so expensive. So if you scan the QR code at the top right, you'll get access to the paper. It's also in the Whova app. So it's there as well, if you want to know more information about the results, because I'll just give you kind of a brief snapshot of it today. Okay, so to give you a general idea, so in the program, like Eric said, there were 14 mentors and 29 mentee coaches participating from a lot of different parasports and competitive levels. We conducted focus groups with the mentees and the mentors separately at the halfway point, and individual interviews at the end of the program. Again, getting a better understanding of what they liked, what they didn't, and what recommendations they had. The data was analyzed using a reflexive thematic analysis. So that essentially just means we looked at general patterns and themes in the data, and we ended up with 3 overarching themes. So the first one being outcomes of mentorship. So what we felt that the mentees, or what the mentees talked about acquiring from the program, the disability specific coaching knowledge that came out of this, or what they were interested in learning about. As Darda mentioned this morning, coaching is coaching, but there are nuances. And so what are those nuances and what did they want to learn? And then the last one being the virtual component. So this was done during the COVID-19 pandemic. So how did they feel like the virtual programming played a role in their learning? So starting with the outcomes, we saw that mentees really appreciated having a mentor who was knowledgeable and supportive of their learning. And because of this relationship and because of taking part in the program, they felt more confident to coach athletes with disabilities as a result. But they said, they caveated it sometimes to say to a certain extent. So what that looked like was in one interview, for example, I said, how do you feel after 1 year now? How's your comfort level coaching in para? And this mentee said, it's probably 60%. And I honestly wasn't sure if that was good or not. So I was like, what did it start with? And she said, oh, probably 10. Yeah, it's been a big improvement. The people were so enthusiastic, letting me know it's okay if you don't know everything. Everybody's learning. And I think that was really helpful. So it shows a couple of things. It shows how low the confidence level is for incoming parasport coaches. They really don't feel like they have the confidence or the knowledge or the skill set to be able to do it. It comes to this idea that parasport is so scary and all of this. And we really want to debunk that myth. Because they weren't able to say it was 100%, the reason why was that it was during the pandemic. They weren't able to coach at the time. Like Gwen said, they weren't necessarily even coaching. So until they were able to get into the environment with their mentors, have that in-person experience, they felt they weren't really going to be able to get to that 100% level just yet. Even though we weren't necessarily anticipating it, we also saw that mentors experience really benefiting from the program as well and gaining confidence and a sense of community. So in the focus group, for example, one of the mentors said, I know this gathering is really beneficial to me, hearing what other coaches are doing. It validates some of the things I think I'm doing right. At least there's that gauge to say, oh, okay, I think I'm on the right track. So they mentioned quite a bit after that they really enjoyed the focus group, and it was, you know, for us it was for the research, and then we realized this is actually benefiting them in a whole different context in terms of gaining that community with other parasport coaches. So it was one of the things that Eric will talk about after of improvements to the program by adding a community of practice piece. Okay, and then the second theme was the disability specific coaching knowledge. So what we saw here was that some of the previous literature where we see coaches wanting this disability specific knowledge, and the point that Gwen was making is that it was very much supported. The coaches wanted to know more information about accessibility, classification, functional ability, inclusive language. One of the examples here is a mentee said, I learned more about classification of athletes. I figured if you broke your neck at the shoulder blades, from there downward, you'd be paralyzed. It's not necessarily true. You could be paralyzed, but still have function down your arms. So it was a learning curve for me because my mentor jumps up and down on his chair like there's no problem. So again, they wanted to know more information about disability types, disability specific knowledge, but sometimes it's not always comfortable to be able to ask these questions in front of 100 people, for example. So having a one-on-one relationship, having a mentor to be able to say, how does it work? Can you tell me a little bit more information about that? Had allowed them to ask these questions and get that information. And then the last theme was how they felt about virtual learning. This, there were mixed reviews, I think, as we can all understand. In COVID, we wanted to be back with in-person, gaining that relationship in person again. But so they did say that, of course, but they also said that the virtual program allowed for a lot more reach and accessibility than if it were strictly in person only. So in the focus groups, they talked about this a lot. They said, I don't think the mentorship program would have been possible without it. I'm from a small community. I don't drive. I have this disability. So my only transportation would have been on the train. Had it not been for the pandemic, I don't think I probably wouldn't have been included. And then another mentee followed that up and said, I actually think the online piece is invaluable because it greatly opens up your capacity to meet with people who aren't geographically able to work with you. So even though we have this kind of like doom and gloom feel about COVID and Zoom and all of that, sometimes there is a lot of benefits that you can get from the reach and accessibility of being able to talk to anyone across Ontario at any time. And there's that convenience aspect. So takeaways, what we saw from this is that we did see both mentor and mentee coaches valued and appreciated and benefited from taking part in the program, both professionally and personally. It led to more confidence for the mentees. But to a certain extent, they still wanted more disability specific information, and they still wanted to get in person with their mentors in the daily training environment so that they could adapt their coaching practices and have that more frequent, quick feedback. But we saw that, you know, in conjunction with in-person opportunities, virtual programming has a really big benefit for formal mentorship to allow for that more inclusive learning. And I'll pass it back over to Eric here for the impact.
Thank you. So just wanted to touch on the impact that the program, how it has on the parasport community. So this program, more trained coaches, essentially. More coaches have the abilities to now coach athletes with a disability. So if an athlete with a disability comes to a practice, coach knows how to train that athlete. Clubs are now providing accessibility needs for athletes with a disability. This could be from ramps to adaptive sports equipment. Coaches from the program are now offering more programs for athletes with a disability in their clubs. One coach was able to purchase wheelchairs for her club because the mentor was able to point them in the right direction. We had also one coach was offered an opportunity to take part at a Para World Camp. And finally, these matches form long-lasting relationships. So the apprentices and mentors continue to meet outside of the program and build off what they have learned during the program. So we are currently in our 4th cohort, and we have made some improvements to the program. We've introduced a platform called Mentor City that is essentially a one-stop shop for the program. Coaches can apply on the program, so can mentors. We match coaches and mentors directly on the program, so there's no more Excel spreadsheets. We communicate, the communication with mentor and apprentice is very similar to Zoom. So there's the ability to text to message, video call, voice call, or yeah, that's basically it. That's all we really need. You can complete all your assignments on the program, so no need to go anywhere elsewhere. Again, no need to send emails for PDFs. Coaches just access all their assignments directly on Mentor City. We do have a community practice piece where coaches can ask questions. They share different resources with one another, essentially just communicate and have that sense of community on the platform itself. And then finally, the Coaches Association of Ontario can also provide resources. So there's a resource hub that coaches can access at any times. Another improvement we've done is we've shortened the cycle from a 12-month cycle to a 6-month cycle. We did this to allow coaches in their off season to participate. We found that coaches were really busy when they were in season, so they would put the program off to the side. So we've just shortened it, and we now have 2 cohorts per year, just to allow for accessibility and for coaches to participate when they have the time to do it. We provide opportunities for apprentices and mentors to meet at different CEO hosted events. If it's either PD sessions, summits, workshops, conferences, we do provide those opportunities for them as well. And using previous apprentices from years prior to share experiences on the onboarding webinar. This has been extremely positive, as it gives a sense as to what to expect from the program, and also just through the lens of a coach who's actually gone through the program. We do hope to follow up with these coaches from the pilot program to see where they are after 5 years have passed. Hopefully we can tap into Danielle's resources, expertise. Finally, we're going to open up the floor as well, or you can use your coaching voice. We just wanted to ask now, what could mentorship look like in your environment? We understand that not all of you are coaches, but what could it look like in your role in your organization? How can it improve not only you, but the people that you work with? How can it improve efficiency or even morale of the group? So happy to listen and discuss that. If anyone has any comments. Hopefully
Or even if you already have a mentorship aspect in your program, what does it look like? How could it be improved? Yeah.
It's more of an add to discussion, I guess. We don't have one, and I actually participated in this mentorship program and got a lot of value from it, and was hoping now. So I'm growing the sport of paratriathlon, and I'm very informally mentoring my colleague here who's in another session. I'm trying to figure out what it's going to look like in our environment. And I think right now, for the discussions we've had, it's getting like a really clear structure to her of like, what does that formal training look like? Because it's really confusing. Like, what courses does she need to take? And having like the geography of Ontario is ridiculous. So the hands-on like mentorship is really difficult for us. So we're trying like a virtual approach. Like, can we analyze videos together? Can we meet once a week? Like, we are really trying to figure out what that looks like as our program starts to grow. So
yeah,
I got nothing, but good discussion.
Yeah, the virtual environment we found was very helpful, especially during COVID. People had the opportunity to meet their mentors, even if they were from across the province. So that's definitely very helpful. And with technology these days, anything is possible.
I don't know if does this work? Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that we saw from the coaches in the COVID program was, they did the watching video together and felt like that was really valuable. So it's like something you can take with you in a hybrid approach and then be strategic about the in-person opportunities. So it's probably not going to happen every Monday night, but maybe there's a competition or something that you could plan ahead and then have like once a month, once every 3 months or whatever it is, where you plan for that. You have like your 45 minutes before and after and just make it super strategic. But I think the virtual aspect is really valuable because you can do it more frequently. You can do it more conveniently.
And then we do offer those opportunities, as mentioned, to meet in person at different events. So that could be the potential time where you actually meet face to face. Gwen, we'll come to you after the gentleman in the back with the mic. Go ahead.
Yeah. So first of all, it was fun being part of that and watching and not seeing how it came out is pretty cool to hear from you guys and see where it went. The biggest thing that I found, been part of mentorship in one way or another to thousands of coaches actually over the last 40 years, but the way that you've outlined the chart is so nice because it comes up with objective measures. And it literally puts it down to what are we doing this week? What are we doing? So when a lot of mentors met with coaches and watched a practice, but they didn't break it down, and like they watched them do a drill and didn't break it down to saying, what's the technical aspects that you're actually trying to teach? You know, and when you start to break it down bit by bit and you go through the 3 goals and you go through the timelines across, and it breaks it down so that, you know, a coach I spoke to last week, matter of fact, in one group, there was 17 people on the call, and all but 3 of them, the first thing they were going to do was teach their players to compete and it was all subjective stuff. Like, I want you to play harder. I want you to, you know, give me 100%, like stuff that couldn't even be done. And when we started to break it down objectively and then look at it and say, okay, you want them, these were hockey coaches, and you want them to be able to move the puck across the front of the net and get that shot off quickly. How often are you isolating and practicing it? And then you broke it down according to the goals, and the mentorship started to fall into place because now they saw how they were actually teaching skills and able to measure them, that they would then show up in games.
Yeah, we ask everyone to be as specific as we can through that assignment. And Gwen mentioned earlier, you want your goals to be attainable, not just dreams. That probably wasn't the exact phrase you used, but along those lines. But yeah, we found great success with this, and people still email us and they're saying we're still using that same assignment you have in your hands to identify new goals and new objectives that they could use in the future. Thank you for that comment.
I think the only thing I'll add there is there was very little conflict that arose from the program review, but the one that stands out to me was when the goals didn't align between the mentors and the mentees. And especially one stands in my mind right now of just a mentor wanting to do something very broad and specific, broad to like the Parasport program in general, and the mentee wanted to focus on the one athlete that they were working with, and that was really what they felt was going to be most valuable to them. But it wasn't lining up because they had different goals and different intentions. So some of the advice that we got was to follow the mentee's lead. This was actually advice from a mentor coach saying, like, listen, this isn't about you. As much as you want to do this and you want to impart your knowledge, follow what your mentee wants and guide them that way. It's going to be way more beneficial for you. So yeah, the goal setting was one we wanted to show because it was a really, you know, powerful piece of the mentorship program.
Gwen Mercedes is coming with the mic.
Thanks. I just wanted to respond to triathlon specifically, but it would apply to other sports as well. I did have one triathlon mentee that I did formally. Didn't work out all that well because he didn't have an athlete who was a parasport participant. But informally, had other people reach out to me that were doing it, and we were figuring out as we went. So it was a visually impaired athlete. And I would encourage you from that lesson that we learned is to connect with people that are actually doing it, because we don't all have to recreate the wheel. They've probably come up with some good strategies to address the abilities and disabilities and figure out good training strategies. So reach out to, doesn't have to be a coach necessarily, but another triathlon athlete who has a special challenge. They'll probably give you more advice than any of us would.
Thank you, Gwen. Anyone else? So that concludes our presentation. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, go ahead.
In follow-up, and the beauty with you guys is that you work with everybody in your sport possible. Listen, but is you put out to people, you know, what do you want from mentorship? Because again, going back to the hockey group, they're so cloistered that I remember going to the Commonwealth Games in Victoria. The beauty was coaches were from all disciplines were interacting and changing ideas. Hockey coaches don't do that. And, you know, so they don't necessarily keep up to the latest stuff on, you know, how do you help a player focus on a game during exam period or any of that stuff where, you know, someone who's teaching rugby may have the answer to that.
Yeah, so I'll say a part of our matching process is we do actually do ask that question on the application to the apprentice. And then we do match based on what they've said and what the mentor said, so that they kind of have the same objectives and goals. And then and then the other part was, can you repeat the other part, please?
No, the biggest part, is just when you deal in a community of coaches, you get great ideas from other sports.
Yeah, so the community practice piece on the Mentor City, that's exactly what it's for. We have people that share different resources that they've found and that they find valuable for other coaches to review. Even some mentors have shared some resources on there. And then if somebody has some questions that they have to ask, they can pose them in that community practice piece. So kind of think that fits in nicely for a mentorship program like this.
Only thing I'd add there is from what I noticed talking to the coaches, it seemed like quite a few mentees were disappointed that they didn't get someone in their sport. And then they'd very quickly follow it up to be like, but I get it. There's not that many people in the sport and stuff like that. But then all of a sudden they'd keep reflecting and I just would see the thought process keep going and say, but you know what? It's actually probably good. It's good that I'm getting someone from an entirely different perspective and they can challenge me on this and give me different perspectives and stuff like that. So I feel like, you know, it's ideal in terms of being able to have commonalities with the same sport, but you're not necessarily going to have that different perspective or be able to learn from an entirely different environment. And I think that was a big strength of this program, was that it was so many different sports and they got to connect with, you know, all different types of parasports across Ontario. And it's something that I'd like to see in different organizations as well.
I really liked the tool. I used the new website, I guess, when I was part of this, but I really like the tools and templates that we used as part of it. And now that I have another coach reaching out as me, like to have me as a mentor, is that on like not being a part of this program, that are any of those resources available that we can pull from? Is it better to flow through the program so that you have that data?
I would say yes, flow through the program.
Okay.
But if you really want the resources just to use between you and your apprentice, we can probably make that work. Yeah.
Not the whole, like,
No, but yeah. Sure.
So just to repeat the question, it's where do you access those types of resources if you're not inside a formal program? And so Eric is offering our
Join the program.
join the program, but also
That's
they are available
ideal.
through the Coaches Association.
Yeah, coachesontario.ca is our website. You can find resources there as well.
What type of training is there for mentors?
There's the NCCP mentorship module that's run through the Coaching Association of Canada, or we deliver it. So that is one of the modules we made required. We made it as a requirement for mentors to complete. Essentially just guides them and provides different principles of mentorship and how they can have a successful relationship with their apprentice coach.